What's going on, everybody? It's Johnny King with another episode of the Becoming Kings podcast. I'm super excited to have Terence Carfrae on the podcast, who is now a veteran of the podcast. This is your second time. You're chiming in all the way from around the globe from Bali once again. How are you, brother? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again too. Really glad to be here.
And you're last time I had you on, we were talking about so many different things. You're as a men's coach, if you will, a retreat facilitator, workshop facilitator, helping men work through rites of passage, functional medicine, so many different things that we've talked about. And I know that was like at the end of our previous, I think that was about a year ago, actually. I said, I got to have you back on. So it's just nice to circle back around and be able to dive in even deeper. But tell me a little bit more of what you've been up to this past year and what you're excited about as we kind of get ready for 2024.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the last year for me has been really one of I developed a little bit of hubris here in the last year. I kind of felt like I had a lot of things figured out, and I was starting to rest on my laurels a little bit in my own personal development and life. And some things have been starting to show up again, as they do in the cyclical nature of a man's development. And so I'm really coming to terms with some things for myself now. And my work is going well, and I feel solid in that realm. But for my personal life, noticing that some of the things that have been existent since my childhood that I've never really attended to, existence is starting to say, hey, maybe it's time to start looking at these things. And the one that's popping up for me at the moment is anxiety, realizing that I have been a sufferer of chronic anxiety my whole life and been ignorant of it. Found all these strategies to deal with it, to cope with it, to have it under the radar of my conscious awareness. And now it's becoming evident that it's actually, this is a very consistent issue that I've been with since I was a little kid.
But I imagine in your work, as often is the case, I feel like things that come up for us as coaches are, they resonate so much with guys that we're working with or that we're aiming to connect with. Do you see there's, I was just going to say, like, do you feel like a lot of this anxiety is coming from situational things in your life? Do you feel like it's more relational? Is it more paternal, maternal wounds? Where do you feel like what's the root of the anxiety? Do you feel like?
Yeah, great question. That question itself is really the key to approaching it, is to understand that, because I think for anxiety, there's layers. And as we pierce through the layers, we realize it's something deeper, it's something deeper, it's something deeper. And it started earlier than when we imagine. And the process of meeting anxiety seems to be, we look at the superficial things. I know I do. I was like, oh, well, it's, I wasn't getting enough sleep, or I've got this deadline for something I'm doing at work, or there's some fight that I had with my partner, something that's going on. That's the root cause of my anxiety. And then as I explore it, it's like layers and layers and layers. And it may well be that, I go back to a point of childhood, and there was some strategy that I used there of trying to control situations or not feeling safe. Or it could be back to, like, even in utero, and my mother was anxious, and I learned this tendency to hold tight in the feeling of the hormones and the biochemicals that were going through my infant fetal body at the time, of this, like, something's not okay. And yeah, I'm not sure what it really is. But you ask the question, is it relational? Is it paternal? Is it maternal? The place that's been showing up, which is the clarion call of, I need to address this, is it really was relational anxiety for me, relationship anxiety. And it is something, interestingly enough, you've made the point earlier that as coaches, we tend to, bring in these opportunities for our own health and healing and growth And it seems to be mirrored in the world of the coaching that we do. And funnily enough, guess what I'm working with a lot with my clients at the moment. And with this dynamic, what I noticed with myself is that I'm 47 years old, and I've had through my life a string of relationships. And whenever there's a degree of intimacy or commitment that's required, suddenly so much about the relationship seems wrong. And I start having these intrusive thoughts of like, oh man, is she beautiful enough? Or like, is this behavior that she's doing something I can live with? Would she be a good mother for my kids? And then this chewing on these intrusive thoughts comes into really bright contrast to my normal peaceful world. And I have these voices that are just, loud and persistent. And the moment that it became very clear, it was a little while ago, I came awake with a start at 3 a.m. in the morning, just like, oh, I'm not in the right relationship. And I had the heart beating and the mind racing, and I was wide awake, out of a sleep. And I told myself the story. It's my intuition telling me something here. I need to get out of this relationship. And then I went and spoke with friends, and then had some calming of my system. And then that resolve and surety just disappeared like a fart in the wind. I was like, what happened? I was so sure. And that was my moment of turning inward and saying, okay, something's going on here. And what I've been labeling as my intuition, I actually believe is just the voices of my fear and anxiety. And so, having observed myself over my lifetime with these relationships that have been steadily getting longer and longer, and my last relationship prior to this one was 5 years, and it was a really beautiful, solid relationship where we came to a mutual understanding that our paths weren't aligned anymore. And I've stepped into this relationship, which I've been in for almost 3 years now. And it's beautiful and it's solid. And it's also the place where I'm now feeling safe enough to actually work on these issues of relationship anxiety. But I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to be fooled that this is relationship anxiety. It is anxiety that is stemming from something really deep within my past that's just showing up in this relational field now. And it's the holding place for it. Not that fun for my partner, but it's beautiful for us to be able to meet it together.
Well, I think I asked, like, what's the root cause of it? And for me, I know in my healing journey, when I have figured out what that root cause is, it usually has led to a lot more compassion, empathy for myself. And like, oh, that's just a little, 8-year-old that learned a coping mechanism that I'm still leading as a 35-year-old at the time, or something that, and it's allowed me to be like, oh gosh, versus beating myself up so much about it. But to your point, I also believe that there's things that I've also discovered in my life that, like, at some point it's almost a waste to try to figure out what the exact moment was, or what, because it doesn't really ultimately matter. I feel like if you have inherently the compassion, the grace, and the empathy for yourself, and you can just start to work through it and heal it regardless. I feel like the awareness is the most important part towards beginning to chip away at, the coping mechanism or whatever. Right. But I think that's pretty cool. And that really resonates for me too, because I think I probably do a lot of those things as well. And realize it's not so much having to do with my partner as it is just with my own anxiety, my own fears, and then we label it, especially when we have a certain feeling of total certainty, as like, oh my gosh, it's my intuition. But yeah, likewise, when my nervous system then relaxes, it's like, what did I get all messed up about? It's so strange. So I think there's probably so many men that are listening right now that are thinking that they probably do that as well. And I feel like anxiety is such a good topic of conversation at the moment, because there's so much stuff going on in the world, obviously with wars and inflation and challenges with currencies and cryptocurrencies and digital currencies and
Right.
presidencies and corruption. There's just so much that you and me, that anyone listening could be fixated on, that would create unraveling anxiety that oftentimes it's just a distraction, I feel like, from finding one's purpose and, healing first and foremost, and then moving into their own purpose. Because at the end of the day, we only have so much time on this planet as men to do our work. And I feel like a lot of times we're distracted by social media or unhealed wounds, So I think that anxiety is a big part of it. But do you feel like a lot of men suffer from this that you're talking about, or is this kind of something that you've just started to touch upon for yourself and you haven't necessarily explored it beyond your own experience?
You just unpacked a lot there that I'd love to touch on a few different points. But to answer your last question, I think that this issue in the West, in our modern Western civilized world, is so pervasive that I would imagine that it'd be a very rare person that doesn't have some level of it at some times, of anxiety, generalized anxiety. But I'd probably even go further to say, just with the way that our culture has been oriented towards purpose-driven success, accumulation of wealth, safety, with the inundation of media that is really, really clever at hitting us in the fear place of, you're not going to be okay, you need to be worried about this. And that generation of that fear response and concern of the future, I imagine that it'd be a pretty safe bet that most men are suffering to some degree with this, for sure. Yeah. But I challenge the idea that this is a distraction from us living a purpose-filled life. I'm needing for myself, especially, to come into the relationship with the idea that this anxiety is a gift for me, that my actual true work is not about what I'm doing in the outside world. It's really about how I'm meeting myself. And I subscribe to the idea that there's a journey that my being, my soul, if you like, is going on, and that my primary allegiance is to that development, that growth, that understanding of the truth of who I am, beyond any trappings of the world or any identification or status or things that I've accomplished, my legacy. Like, all of that's going to be washed away with time. Give it 1,000 years and maybe my soul's still kicking on in another life. And the things that I've accomplished in this life are going to be, really irrelevant. But the things that I accomplish internally in this life will be very relevant. So for me, this is not a distraction. This is a beautiful gift and a challenge for me of like, okay, this is my next body of work, is how do I meet myself with the compassion, with the love, with the acceptance, with the patience that those parts of me that are freaking out internally desire, as me as the conscious parent of myself and my parts. How do I meet that inner child that's hiding in the bedroom, crying under the sheets, like, I'm scared, daddy? And it's like, yeah, okay, come here, son. Like, how can I come and hold myself? But you know what? I imagine this may be true for a lot of people. I speak to myself in my unconscious moments in ways that I would never speak to another person. And when I'm now starting to look at the language of that, which is just, it's something I haven't brought awareness to. You mentioned awareness, and I'm really on board with that. My awareness of these inner voices and the way that I'm telling myself to shut up or man up, or that I'm an idiot or I'm being weak or whatever it is, I wouldn't apply that language to someone that I hated today. I'd still deal with them with a greater modicum of respect and compassion than I've been dealing with myself. And then when I consider, like, this is maybe like a 3-year-old part of myself, a 4-year-old part, how would I be with a child? Would I be telling them, oh, shut up, what are you worried about? Like, this is just stupid. Like, let it go. Like, get over it. And would I yell at them? I can't imagine I'd do that. And so, coming into that humbleness for me of recognizing that there's parts of me that are really struggling. And I've now gone through my own rites of passage to be an adult man that's now capable of offering up the parenting skills that these parts that have been waiting for me to arrive for so long, now they can receive and I can offer them.
I appreciate the reframe, and I think that's so good. I think there's probably a insight into my own way of how I, to your point, like we talk so down to ourselves. And for me, I do feel like an underlying belief is that I'm a disappointment. So that how, you know, how could you, or all the internal conversations that are so strong at ourselves is a lot of times part of the issue. And I like the reframe. It's like, no, this is a distraction, or call it a wounding, but it's more so a gift. And so I love that. I do feel like a lot of what you're talking about is what has kept men from being strong leaders in this world. And I feel like the world is, screaming, aching for strong leadership, both in men and women. But I also feel like, as you mentioned, rites of passage, that it's the result of not having that. And I didn't have that. I'm still struggling in my 40s now in my, intimate relationships and with my relationships with my employees to come from a authentic, leadership, integrity, not trying to fake it till I make it, but just trying to really have a clear direction of where I'm going in life and be able to lead those that are looking for that leadership. So is there maybe we can talk about leadership, but also talk about the importance of rites of passage and why there's a lack of rites of passage in today's day and age.
Yeah. The leadership piece feels like it's really alive for me. And I think there's an image that's been portrayed in the world of leaders, that the ones that are worthy of following are the ones that have got it all figured out. And they're these strong, capable men that like bulletproof and they can just handle. And I'd love to see the age of that facade drop away. And I would really love to see an age of men that are like you and I, that have come into terms with our humanness, that we're still figuring it out. Like, oh man, I thought I'd have it figured out by now, but it seems like every decade that I get along, I realize that I know less and less, and I have more and more stuff that's uncovered. And wow, to meet this, I need more and more humbleness to recognize that this is a journey that doesn't have this point where I'm like, you know what, I've made it, I've accomplished everything, done. I can rest enlightened on the top of the mountain. It doesn't feel like that to me. And like hearing you speak of your own challenges and vulnerability, for me, I feel much more open to you and a lot more willing to want to sit and say, wow, tell me about your journey. I'd love for you to lead me through like this world of like, how have you figured out these things to come to this place of, I don't know. And to actually be able to rest there confidently in yourself, saying, you know what, I don't know, man. It's a real mystery, but these are the different trails that I've gone down, and this is what I've experienced so far. They're men that I trust in the world to do that. So I really appreciate you modeling that for me just there. And with regards to rites of passage, another humbling thing is for me, I'm due another rite of passage. Like I've just discovered a whole nother world within me that is wanting to be met. And I'm looking to mobilize the courage to meet it. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night from a dream where I was in this vast building with all of these labyrinth halls and back doors and stairways and things. And something was chasing me. There were people, like some guard, some group that wanted me. And I was running and hiding and like looking for the best place to hide. And I realized it's a beautiful metaphor for some of the ways I live my life, that I have these gifts that I know they're really valuable. And I also know that there are powers in the world that don't want these gifts shared. And those powers are coming for me. And people that have shined their light really brightly in the past, I've got a lot of evidence that those people get killed. And I'm like, I just got to make myself small. I don't want to be killed. I don't want to be persecuted. And so I'm just going to find like the most hidden point down this maze and these corridors and find some little hidey hole underneath some stairs. And in my dream, that's what I was looking for, just so I can be safe and they won't find me here. And I'm like, wow, that's how I've been living my life in some ways, parts of me. I haven't been able to stand on that mountaintop with my chest exposed, roaring my truth out to the world. It's like, no, someone's going to take a shot at me. And I'm scared of that. And for me, it's like, well, maybe it's time for me to go through another rite of passage to find the courage to stand on that mountaintop, my chest exposed, roaring to the world like, no, I don't stand for this corruption anymore. I stand for truth. And that's my own game. That's the thing that calls me forth. And for me, to recognize that rites of passage, ideally, it would be something that we would have had consistent through our experience of life, that was ritualized from a kid through different stages. And we've lost that. And so for me, I'm coming up to another one, and I've had to develop my own in the past. And this one, I'll probably bring some guys together and help me to break through. I'll leverage my men's groups or my friends to find a way. You know, it's become such a part of my work that my foundation coaching program now is the entry point into my work is for guys to come and do a rite of passage with me. And we get to design up their own particular rite of passage of how they get to meet themselves. And we go through this journey for 6 weeks of identifying where they're dependent and doing an audit on their system and where they've abdicated responsibility, where their fears are, and how to bring all that information together to create something that is a transition point for them, where they can say there was a before and now there is an after. And that part of me that was afraid, that was unwilling to meet my life in a certain way, that part of me now can be put to rest because there's a new version of me that's here now and ready to meet life in the way that I'm destined to. And so, yeah, that 6-week program is, yeah, it's a birthing of my heart and my awareness of the need for this in our culture, especially for the lack of it. And it's for men of all ages. Like you said, you're in your 40s, I'm 47, and I don't imagine it's ever going to end. You know, the great rite of passage that we're all building ourselves up to is to be able to meet death one day. And that rite of passage, perhaps the greatest one since our birth, like, how do you want to do that? Like, are you going to prepare for that? For me, I'm preparing now. I'm like, I want to make sure that when that moment comes, when death comes to greet me, that I mobilize my courage, I look it square in the eyes, and I don't go into it wanting to fight. I go into it with the heart that says, oh, my old dear friend, I'm so glad you've returned. Take me with you. I'm ready. And yeah, how can I live from this day to that in preparation, walking the sacred journey through to that moment?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not just, I think in previous years, I feel like I thought, a rite of passage is a coming into manhood, and once you go through it, you're good. But it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you could go through several rites of passage each time you're needing to kind of level up your game. Is that true, or do you feel like men need to go through a main rite of passage, and then beyond that, then it's like they can't resort back to maybe their boyhood, they're into their manhood and just chipping away at becoming more of a professional man at that point? Or do you feel like it's healthy for men to go through various rites of passages throughout seasons of life?
Well, I think there's a couple of parts of this. I see it as vital that we go through some ritualized rites of passage at various points through our life. Like, we have things like weddings, which is a a we have the entry into college, which is a rite of passage. We have the moving out of home, which is a rite of passage. And these may or may not be ritualized. Maybe our 21st birthday, in Australia, the 21st birthday is a big deal for people. It's the coming of age as an adult. In Jewish tradition, they have the bar mitzvah, which is the rite of passage there. In Kenya, when I was there, they have this circumcision ceremony at around the age of 13, which is a massive rite of passage for them. And I think the ritualized rite of passages are really important. And there are certain elements to it where we go through an experience, and on the other side of it, we're welcomed back as the new person by our community, or maybe it's just one other person, but there's an acknowledgement from the external world that we're different. And there are these preceding steps to come up to that point, some task that we have to meet ourselves in some particular way, and then being welcomed back. There's a structure to what rites of passage are. But I think as equally important is to recognize the need for awareness of rites of passage that are happening all the time. If there's ever been a moment in your life where you were afraid to do something, and up until that point in your life, you're like, you know what, I haven't been able to, I could never get up on stage and speak to an audience of more than 100 people. It would terrify me. And then one day you did it. The awareness that that was a rite of passage, you are no longer the person that is too afraid to stand up. You've done it. You now have that in your back pocket, like, no, I'm good. I got that. It was a rite of passage for me. The first time you got up onto the bike by yourself as a kid without dad there holding on to you, and you did it by yourself, and you were scared, but you did it. That was a rite of passage for you. You are no longer the little boy that's too afraid to ride the bike. You are a little boy now who is capable of riding a bike by yourself. And when we come into that awareness of we are constantly offering ourselves opportunities to meet ourselves, meet our fear, to let go of the version of ourselves that's limited, and we embrace a larger version of ourselves, that's a rite of passage. And you've gone through so many of them in your life. You're a beast. Look what you've done in your life. And when we get to see that, we can accumulate the courage that we have garnered from all of those experiences. And just like if we were playing some computer game and you got through the first boss, that's like the rite of passage. But the next boss you get to, you want it to be harder than that first boss, right? Because you want to keep the game interesting. So boss at level 2 is like, oh yeah, I really had to meet myself in this. And you're at boss 59 or whatever, or let's call it the age, you're in your mid 40s. The bosses that you're fighting now, when you're in your teens, there's no way you would have been able to meet them, because you are now a much more integrated, strong, capable, courageous man. And that's amazing.
I like that analogy because it takes me back to my childhood when I was playing a lot more video games than I play now, but it's so true. And I do feel like that, yeah, just every single time we've leveled up is a rite of passage, and
Exactly.
Used to be so scared of recording podcasts, so scared of posting videos of me in any shape or form on the internet, and that became it's no big thing at all at this point, right? But I remember at times there's just even the fear of leaving my corporate job and starting my first business, or now things that were so scary to me at the time are now no big deal. It's easy, I think, at times then for us to forget how challenging it is for people who are maybe working on breaking through of different levels that we may now take for granted, So I think that's important to me as I empathize with those that are taking big steps in their life, no matter what. It's a rite of passage, and they shouldn't shame themselves or compare themselves with other people because other people might make it look easy, right? But I think that's such a vital distinction. I appreciate you mentioning that, that those rites of passage never really do end. And I know for me, especially with the whole concept of becoming kings, and obviously it's a play off of my genuine last name, but I love the whole idea, and I've seen it in the work that you do too, just the whole path to becoming king that Alison Armstrong talks about, that so many people talk about, which is, I feel like, just being a man of living abundantly, and being in integrity, just being authentic, congruent with your head and your heart and your balls, for that matter, right? And I think as we continue to get older and keep leveling up and keep meeting and defeating new level bosses, you know, that is the point, so that when we do meet our final day, if you will,
Final boss.
the final boss, that we move through whatever that next experience is, beyond this human experience, that we do it with grace and compassion, and that we leave the most important, like a legacy of love, whether it be children or relationships or just our impact in the world. And I feel like that's a big part of it. So I digress, but what do you feel like is a big part of a man's path to becoming a king, and what's your journey in that same endeavor, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I love the question as well. It's something I've been really chewing on. Like, what is it to become a king? What is it to embody that king energy? And what kind of king am I identifying with that I want to become? Because there's these kings of history. There's these Alexander the Great, or Genghis Khan, or King Arthur, and there's these archetypal kings that we have out there. And, you know, some of them were warlords, some of them were incredibly hedonistic and just narcissistic and wanted things for themselves. But then we got, you know, King Arthur, which I think is in our lineage the epitome of the good king. And what were his attributes? And I love this story that's cross cultures, of the king that disguises himself and then walks among the people. And he goes out and he goes into the taverns, and he goes among the homeless on the street, and he goes to the puppeteer show where they're mocking him, and he walks as a common man through his kingdom to see, like, what is the experience of the common people. And if there was one attribute that I would say is the highest attribute of a king that I wish to embody, it's humbleness. The accumulation of power has this propensity to be able to corrupt us, that the parts of ourselves that are attached to the idea that we are something, when we afford those things, those aspects of ourselves power, they seem to become really loud, and they seem to become like little kids just running amok in the playground. And the antidote for that hubris, for that narcissism, the antidote for that arrogance and that greed and that power tripping, the tyrant energy, to me is humbleness. And what it means to me is that we start to identify less and less with the aspects of ourself that are needy and greedy. And we identify more and more with this masculine core, which is connected to something that's much greater than self. And to me, the greatest kings are the ones that have surrendered their own personal will. And they're now living through the will of their higher self, the will of the universe, the will of existence, the will of God, that they are no longer acting just for their small self. Their humbleness has become so pervasive through them that they just become a vessel for the wisdom of existence to be acted through them as the vessel. And then that is a man that is worthy of the power, because, you know, it's existence is only going to provide that level of power to those ones that have demonstrated they don't. It'll blow us out if we tap into that wellspring of power from the universe, and we've got parts of us that want to hold it and attach to it and claim it as ours. It's, you know, you've seen the dramas that happen on the world stage when people do that. They play out the most incredible power trips and destructive energy. It's like, wow, like that's incredible. So for me, the path to becoming a king is to perpetually drop into that place of the I don't know. Like, I've explored as much as I can, and I have to surrender here. And I am I'm merely human. And as much as I'd like to imagine myself as immortal and all capable and going to be enlightened and all, just rest and like, you know what, I'm a human man and I'm mortal and I'm doing the best I can. And I have more flaws than I care to count, but I found something beautiful within myself that is untouchable, unimpeachable. And it's the truth of my heart. It's pure. And that is my nature. And to me, becoming a king is not about gaining power over anyone else. It's to accept. Perhaps for some people, this is hard to understand or appreciate, but to accept the truth that we have always been all powerful, that perhaps we are actually the source of existence, living out an experience as a human man, pretending that we are just this one little thing when really we are all of existence, just witnessing ourselves through the eyes of one.
That's a mic drop moment, and I completely agree. I do feel like when you boil things down to energy, we're all just energy and all part of the same source, and just vibrating on different frequencies, if you will. I think that's really good, and I feel like that it's so true when we let go of the ego, which a lot of men have, and it's narcissism. It's just, you know, a mask for insecurity and that sort of thing. It's amazing what we can do for impacting the world powerfully. Like I said, going back to that whole conversation about leadership, you know, just going back to that level of kind of oneness, if you will. It just takes a lot of self-reflection, a lot of humility, like you said, a lot of courage. And it's interesting how I feel like, and maybe this would be good to kind of get your opinion on, but like with power, to gain power, I have noticed a theme through life. To gain power is to also simultaneously surrender, which is an interesting, you know, balance. Do you find that that's true for you? Because I feel like that as we get older, it's actually surrendering to the younger version of ourselves, surrendering to, you know, hair that's now gray. It's surrendering to not being as mobile. It's surrendering to, if you have kids, I haven't yet, but to have kids is to wean them and to teach them and lead them, and then to surrender them back to the world and let go of them. Everything's about getting and then letting go, you know. Do you find that that's a big part of the journey to becoming a king as well?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I've considered that before. Is power associated with surrendering? There's a few things that come up. I have this image in my mind of gripping, of like when I'm trying to hold something that I'm not able to actually use my hand, but when I let it go, suddenly I have agency. I can do things again, but it's still not quite hitting the mark for me. I feel like there's some truth in it. I really like it. I'm going to sit with it and see what comes up. Something that I have found though with regards to power is it's kind of this paradoxical thing that I've seen with the ideas of freedom, responsibility, commitment, and how so many men want to abdicate their responsibilities. They want to avoid any commitments, and they want to just be free and capable of doing whatever they want whenever they want. And they see somehow that as being a powerful place to be. And I'm not sure if this ties in exactly, but the paradox of it has seemed to me that the freedom that people want comes from the acceptance of commitments and responsibilities. And you're not free to do anything. You're free to really just explore this thing and cut out all the extraneous noise. And I wonder if power is something similar to that in trying to gather more things and hold more things, that you become burdened by it. But the power that we seek is maybe in surrendering the attachments to things, so that we have now got more capacity and spaciousness inside ourselves to welcome in something that's new, something that's intuitive, something that's magical. But yeah, I like the question. I'm going to sit with it.
Yeah, it's like surrendering control, trying to control everything.
Right.
Surrendering attachment to what we think something should look like, or how someone should behave, or where we should be financially, or relationally by a certain age. I just feel like it's surrendering so much of that stuff. I feel like it's part of the journey of personal growth.
I'm remembering this time at Burning Man and had a few trips out there. Amazing place to go and explore oneself. And I think one of the most powerful times that I've experienced for myself was when I was out there and I was really surrendered in the I don't know. And magic seemed to be happening. And things that I really desired and wanted were coming to me, but it wasn't through my conscious intent. They would surprise me and I wouldn't even realize I really wanted this. I really wanted this conversation or this piece of information. I really wanted this event to happen. And I was so surrendered. I was like, I'm in this major, massive, crazy wonderland. And I'm tapped into this ability and I'm surrendered. Like, where do I go? I'm like, I'll go over here. And it was so clearly not a place where control is going to be exerted very well, because it's madness. It's madness out there. And when I surrendered into that, letting go of the control, yeah, it was like the magic that's always wanting to direct my life was able to finally bypass all of my control mechanisms and direct me. And I was able to experience that magic, that power. And I had tremendous agency. It was like the conversations that I had so much potency in them because there were just ideas coming to me. I wasn't preparing or thinking. It was just these outpourings of this insight with these people, and whoa. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm super powerful right now. This is like, I'm tapped in. And it was almost like I was sitting in the back seat, just enjoying this unfolding play that I wasn't driving the bus. I'm just in the back seat watching, and this is amazing. Bus drivers got this so good. Yeah. I was so relaxed and felt so powerful at the same time.
Part of that, I mean, we could talk, obviously this will go into part 3 of the next time you're on the podcast, but I do feel like a big part of my journey too, and just starting even since 2020, when I had all the time in the world and locked in my house, was actually going out into the woods in Colorado and starting to dabble with mushrooms. And first time in my life, I've never really been much into drugs for that matter, but starting the idea of surrendering my control of my mind and letting that play out was the scariest thing, and it took me back to being on amusement rides when I was a little boy and wanting to get off, and then I couldn't get off, and I couldn't control it, and I was starting to feel like I was going to throw up, or just feeling like anxiety. And to circle back around to what we first started talking about in terms of the anxiety, I feel like, again, it's like it reminds me of what Byron Katie talks about in a bunch of her work. If you've ever heard of her stuff and her book, Loving What Is, it's like, surrender to just you wanting life to be any different than it is. And that's where we have so much anxiety and stress around, is because we want it to be different than how it actually shows up. Instead of just loving, like you said, which is a great reframe, it's not a distraction. It's just, what if, again, Tony Robbins, it's all happening for us versus to us. And it is all a gift. It's all teaching. It's all, an opportunity for us to grow. And that growth and healing can come so much more aptly, or so much quicker, if we're willing to surrender, which again is the scariest thing, I think, for so many of us in this 3-dimensional world, right? But I do feel like what you're saying to me really resonates. Is like just surrendering to our desire to control and to ultimately be safe, and just to actually know that we are safe. It's our divine right, and that we are enough, and we are loved, and we don't have to do anything. I think that brings along the confidence and the integrity and the authenticity of them becoming, great leaders as men and great leaders as human beings, So I do feel like a big part of that is going through rites of passage, like you're talking about, that you lead, to help us learn to shed the the more scared version of ourselves to step into greater trust and just relaxing, from that standpoint. So what are your thoughts along that in terms of just the journey of helping men through their rites of passage? And then my second kind of question on top of that is, if a guy were listening and it's like, okay, this sounds like something I really want to step into, what does that look like? Are they flying out to Bali? Are they flying out to Australia? Or are you doing things online? Is it you coming to the United States? What does that even look like in terms of how you make rites of passage actually happen?
Yeah, thanks, man. I love to share. Like, if there's any guys out there that are recognizing maybe they have a need for a rite of passage, one of the things that I think is really important is for it to be in context of your own life. So I'm not going to take you away and come out to Bali and hang out with me here, although that'd be great if you want to. I'm not going to deny that. Come on over. It's a beautiful place to hang. But what we want to do is to leverage what you've got around you already. And if you don't have the tools and the things, that's part of the program that I put together, is how do we start to curate the support networks and the internally and externally for you to consistently go through these rites of passage in your life. And in the program that I designed is 6 weeks. And, the first couple of weeks, we're just doing basically an audit and figuring out what's going on in their life. And then we design up together the ideal rite of passage, and then we execute it. And then they have that opportunity to create for themselves what they want. Maybe it's a vision quest. Maybe it's running a marathon. Maybe it's doing a darkness retreat. Maybe it's doing some plant medicine or some psychedelics, but it'll be very particular to them. And it needs to meet them where they're scared, but they have capacity to be able to get through it. And we design it up. And then following that, they create the support for them going forward. And that may be the alignment with a couple of friends to be able to have a support network. Maybe they join in one of my men's groups online to be able to have that support for themselves. But yeah, it's a beautiful process for them to be able to step into curating through the help of a ritual elder, a guide like myself, which seems to be part of this process for the psyche of handing over some of that control to someone else to say, hey, help me, I need support. And so I play that role for them, but to guide them, not from me telling them what to do, but drawing from them the wisdom within themselves of what they're needing. And we go through the process, and it's empowering. People come out of it from a rite of passage experience and they're a new person. It's the things that were limiting them before no longer hold sway over them. They're now free. They're free to explore the new version of themselves. And from my perspective, there's nothing that's really more valuable than that. As a man, my desire to be unbound, to be free, to be able to direct my energy in the way that I want is the most important thing. And so, that's what I'm offering, men. How can we unbind you from the limitations you placed on yourself? How can we free you to be able to live your life with greater truth, greater purpose, with greater direction, and with more courage than you had before?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up, because it's, to me, again, yeah, becoming a king to me is, and I say living a life of abundance, but you could all, it's basically freedom to think and to do and to just be authentically every part of you that you are destined to be, right?
Yes.
And to not be part of what life or your parents or someone else told you to be. It's you finding that within yourself. Because if you're just going to Terence to have you tell them how they should be, it's not going to be authentic, And I think that's what's scary about the work sometimes for men is like, no, I've got to be me, and they want to have that control. But again, surrendering to support, having the humility to say, okay, what in life has not been working for me? Let's just call a spade, and then to come with that curiosity, that humility, and that willingness to step into greater levels of consciousness is where the juice of this human experience, I think, really lies. So I love that's what you're supporting. I love that if you were saying that you were just doing in Bali, people are like, oh, that sounds great, but I can't afford that, or I can't take the time off. The reality that you can meet them from anywhere in the world with obviously the technology that we're utilizing right now
Exactly.
really gives them no reason to not step into it other than they're just scared, right? So having said that, how do they, obviously the logical next question is, how do they explore more? How do they get in touch with you? How do they look into that as a possibility to work with you and step through that rite of passage?
Yeah, look, I'm sure you can have the link to my website below. They can check that out, and Instagram handles and things like that. But yeah, if you just search Terence Carfrae, my name, and you can find out more information. And there's so many opportunities in the world. Like, it doesn't even have to be through me. And what I'd encourage any guys listening to this is that you, as a man, as a human being, are wired to have support, to have someone who has gone through something that maybe you're wanting to go through, and for them to guide you through it. Like, throughout the history of humankind, that's what we've done. And so the idea of having shame or needing to control that experience, I'd encourage guys to look at that and to understand that our design is that we've had a tribe around us, and we've had elders around us since the dawn of time that ushered us through these experiences. At the end of the day, it's going to be you. It's going to be you that has to go through the process. It's going to be you that has to meet yourself. But yeah, and I just wanted to also note that there's also these retreat experiences that are around that are in person. Like, I'm about to go to Argentina and teach an initiation retreat down there, 7 days, where we go through some really profound rites of passage that are staged. Like, it's not just one, it's several that's staged throughout the week, that men get a chance to meet themselves and their fears and push through. And you start to realize, like, I'm much more capable than I thought I was. And so there are in-person experiences that can happen as well. It'll probably be too soon to plug that at the moment, but yeah, the initiation journey is something that's happening internationally. It's happening that I facilitate along with a group of other guys. But yeah, that's how they can get in contact with me. Like, let me know if you're feeling like there's a greater degree of power and agency that you want in your life, and that there are some limitations internally that you are struggling to break through. Maybe you're feeling lost. Maybe you're feeling directionless. Maybe you're feeling like you haven't really claimed your manhood yet. Yeah, reach out. There is a way to break through those ceilings within yourself. And maybe you're really just needing to go through a curated rite of passage that's specific for you.
Yeah, because I also feel like, myself included, up until a point, I just got really good at listening to podcasts, watching video on YouTube, and just reading books. But there's just another level that I had to surrender to, no pun intended, just coming back to actually delving into do the work and investing in a more organic type of program that you're talking about with other men. It took my consciousness and my way of being to another level. Just continue to chip away at it. So I really recommend any guy that's listening to this to like take some action and to reach out to Terence and send him a voice note or send him a text through Instagram or whatever. Obviously we'll put all the links down below. But thank you, brother. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I just love your energy and the authenticity and the humility to kind of share even what you're going through versus, like you said, being an alpha, thinking like or trying to act like you have all your shit together and you're perfect, but really just being genuine. It really shines through. So just appreciate what you're doing, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast. I wish we could talk more, but we'll save it for another time since I know you got to go do your work.
Yeah, my pleasure to be with you as well. I really enjoy my experience of you too, and glad that you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, in service of all the men to claim their hearts and stand up for what's good, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much, brother. Do yourself a solid.
Thanks, Johnny.
Jump on social media, follow Terence. I'll link all the stuff below this video and below this podcast. And until we meet on the next episode of Becoming Kings podcast, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.